I'm 94 years old, and most mornings I wake up surprised that I'm still here. Not grateful in a dramatic way, not relieved, just surprised. My wife has been gone for 12 years now. Most of my friends even longer than that. The house is quieter than I ever imagined it would be, and I've lived in it long enough to know every sound it makes when no one else is listening. I'm telling you this because I don't have much left to protect anymore. No reputation to polish. No future to impress anyone with. What I have now is memory, and a kind of clarity that only shows up when there isn't much road ahead. People think anxiety belongs to the young, something you grow out of once life settles down. I used to believe that. I thought worry was part of being responsible, part of being useful, part of being a good man. I was wrong. I can see that now, sitting here at 94, my hands shaking a little more than they used to, my heart quieter than it's ever been. Most mornings I sit at the small kitchen table by the window. Same table I've had for 40 years. The sun comes in just enough to warm the edge of it. I drink my coffee slowly because there's no reason not to. There's nowhere I need to be. That still feels strange. For most of my life, anxiety felt like motion, like I was accomplishing something just by worrying, as if the tightness in my chest meant I cared more than other people, as if staying tense kept things from falling apart. I lived that way for decades. In my 20s and 30s, we didn't call it anxiety. Nobody did. We called it responsibility. We called it ambition. We called it being realistic. I had a steady job, not glamorous, an office, a tie, a desk with a drawer that stuck if you pulled it too fast. I left the house early and came home tired enough that I didn't ask too many questions about my own life. My wife would ask how my day was. I'd say, busy. That was usually the end of it. I worried about money even when we had enough. I worried about losing my job even when I was doing fine. I worried about falling behind people I didn't even admire. I told myself it was normal. At night I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations that were already over, imagining futures that never came, preparing for disasters that didn't happen. I thought that was adulthood. There were small moments back then that should have warned me. I just didn't listen. My daughter asking me to come watch her school play, and me saying I'd try. My wife suggesting a weekend trip, and me saying maybe next month. A friend calling just to talk, and me letting it ring because I was too tired to be present. None of it felt like loss at the time. It felt like efficiency. The anxiety didn't arrive all at once. It didn't knock. It slipped in quietly, through habits I never questioned, through the belief that rest was something you earned, through the idea that once things were settled, I'd finally relax. But things are never settled. They just change their shape. In my 40s, my body started aching in places I hadn't noticed before. My sleep grew lighter, my patience shorter. I carried a low, constant fear like a coat I couldn't take off. I worried about my parents aging, then about losing them, then about becoming them. When my father died, I remember standing at his funeral thinking mostly about the time I hadn't taken. Not dramatic moments, just ordinary ones. Sitting quietly, listening to him talk about nothing in particular. I told myself I'd do better. I didn't. Life kept moving. Work, bills, routines. Anxiety has a way of convincing you that whatever you're chasing is always just one step ahead. That if you stop worrying, something bad will slip through the cracks. So you keep going. By my 50s, the worry had hardened into something heavier. Not panic, just a constant hum. A feeling that I was always late to something, even when I wasn't. My wife noticed before I did. She told me once, gently, that I was never really there. That even when I was sitting beside her, my mind was somewhere else. I didn't argue. I just didn't change. I thought there would be more time. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It came with a phone call on an ordinary afternoon. My wife collapsed in the kitchen. No warning, no long illness. One moment she was there, and the next she wasn't. At the hospital, sitting in a plastic chair under harsh lights, all that anxiety I'd carried for years suddenly had nowhere to go. There was nothing to plan, nothing to prevent, nothing to fix. I remember thinking very clearly, all that worry didn't save her. It didn't save me either. After she died, the silence in the house felt unbearable. Then it felt permanent. I moved from room to room like a guest who had stayed too long. That's when the anxiety changed. It wasn't about the future anymore. It was about the past. I worried about things that could never be undone. Conversations I'd rushed. Evenings I'd spent distracted. Love I'd assumed would always be waiting. There's a particular pain in realizing you were present for a life, but not really in it. You can't fix that. In my 70s, most of the pressure was gone. I was retired. The calendar was empty. But the anxiety didn't disappear. It lingered out of habit. One afternoon, I caught myself worrying about a letter that hadn't arrived yet. Sitting there, heart tight, imagining everything that could be wrong. And suddenly it struck me how absurd it was. No job depended on it. No life hung in the balance. It was just a letter. And yet my body didn't know that. That was the moment I finally understood something. Anxiety isn't about what's happening. It's about what you've trained yourself to expect. I had spent 50 years teaching myself that peace was unsafe. That if I relaxed, something terrible would follow. But terrible things happened anyway. Here's the truth I learned too late. Anxiety doesn't protect you from pain. It just makes sure you suffer twice. Once in anticipation, and once when life actually arrives. I wish I could tell you there's a trick to getting rid of it. There isn't. Not the kind people like to sell. What changed for me was quieter and harder. I stopped believing my worry was useful. Every time that familiar tightness showed up, I asked myself one small question. Is this moment asking for my fear or just my attention? Most of the time it was the second one. The kettle boiling, birds outside the window, the feel of the chair beneath me. Ordinary things I'd missed for a lifetime because my mind was always somewhere else. I didn't force calm. I just stopped running ahead. At 94, there isn't much left to outrun. That's why the anxiety finally loosened its grip. Not because I conquered it, but because I ran out of reasons to feed it. When you truly understand that time is limited, you stop rehearsing disasters that won't matter. You start noticing how light moves across the floor, how quiet the room is, how your breath sounds when you let it be what it is. If you're listening to this and you're younger than me, which you almost certainly are, I won't tell you what to do. I'll only tell you what I wish I'd understood. You've mistaken worry for care, but care doesn't have to hurt. Being present isn't irresponsible. It's rare. You don't need to earn rest by exhausting yourself first. Life doesn't keep score that way. The people who love you won't remember how busy you were. They'll remember whether you were there. And one day, sooner than you think, you'll realize most of the things you feared never happened. And the things that did couldn't have been prevented by worry anyway. That realization is heavy, but it's also freeing. Now, in the evenings, I sit in my chair and listen to the house settle. I let memories come and go without chasing them. Some still hurt. That doesn't change. But the anxiety doesn't run the show anymore. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you stop arguing with time. I don't know how much longer I have. None of us really does. But I know this. I don't want to spend what's left rehearsing fear. If any of this feels familiar, sit with it for a moment. You don't need to fix anything tonight. Just notice where you are. That's enough. For now.